They say if you stay in Hollow Creek long enough, the church finds a way to pull you in. I was a journalist at the time, 29 years old, fresh off a burnout from covering politics and murders in the city. I wanted something quiet, a human interest piece, something slow. My editor suggested I look into The Church That Won't Close out in Hollow Creek. Sounded silly. I took the assignment anyway. The story went like this. St. Winifred's Church had technically been abandoned in the 1960s after a fire gutted part of the nave and killed several parishioners. No funding, no repairs. It was officially closed. But the locals never stopped going. Every Sunday, people still gathered there. No priest, no formal service, just ritual. My editor said no one could explain why they kept coming back. They just do, one source had said. Like they're afraid of what'll happen if they stop. I rented a room in the only inn Hollow Creek had and walked to St. Winifred's the following morning. It was about a mile from the town square, shrouded by thin birches and pine, half hidden under years of overgrowth. A bell hung crookedly in the tower. The front doors were warped and split, but they opened with a shove. Inside, I expected rot, mold, maybe raccoons. Instead, I found candles, fresh, burning, pews wiped clean, a faint smell of incense in the air. The altar, though cracked, had been draped with a crisp white cloth. A row of hymnals sat neatly on a table, untouched by dust. There were people in the pews already, silent, heads bowed, not praying, just waiting. An old man with clouded eyes sat near the front. He turned toward me as I entered. "You're early," he said. I sat near the back, unsure why. I pulled out my phone to snap a photo, but the screen glitched, bright white static. When I tried to record audio, I heard only faint wind and the sound of distant weeping. The doors shut behind me at 10:01 a.m. No one had touched them. At exactly 10:03, the candles flickered, the air grew colder, and a figure appeared behind the altar. A priest. He wore full vestments, white and gold. His collar was tight around his throat, and his eyes were deep, sunken, almost bruised. He didn't speak, just raised both arms. And then, from all around the church, voices began to sing. But no one moved their lips. The hymn wasn't one I knew. Slow, dissonant, each note bent, warped, like it was sliding off a ledge. I tried to stand but couldn't. My legs wouldn't obey. My hands trembled, gripping the back of the pew in front of me. The priest turned and looked straight at me, and he smiled. There was no warmth in it, just teeth. When he opened his mouth, his voice poured out not as sound, but as pressure, like the air thickened around every syllable.
"You came to witness. Now you must remember."
Suddenly, the church shifted. The walls darkened, smeared with black soot. The altar cloth caught fire, but no one moved to stop it. The priest's eyes rolled back, and his skin stretched unnaturally tight. A girl screamed from somewhere behind me, but when I turned, I saw nothing. Only pews, only shadows. And then, one by one, the congregation stood. Their faces had changed, hollow, eyes sunken, some mouths sewn shut with wire. They walked forward, toward the altar, toward him. Each one bowed their head as the priest reached into the fire and pulled out something black and writhing. He placed it into their hands like communion. When the old man from earlier approached, the priest turned to me.
"Do you see now? They never stopped. They never could."
I bolted. I don't know how I moved. One moment I was frozen, the next I was sprinting down the aisle, throwing my shoulder against the doors. They flew open, sunlight nearly blinded me. I didn't stop running until I was back in the town square. I tried to tell the sheriff what I saw. He stared for a moment, then asked where exactly I thought I'd gone. "St. Winifred's," I said. He frowned. That church burned down 50 years ago. Nothing left but a bell and a few bricks. I drove out of Hollow Creek that night, but every Sunday at 10:03 a.m., I hear that hymn again. Doesn't matter where I am, an airport, a hotel room, even a moving train. And when I hear it, I remember the priest's eyes, and I remember what he said.
Now you must remember.
I do. I can't forget. Not ever. They told me the church was abandoned. The real estate agent even laughed when I asked if it was still used for services. St. Anselm's, she said, her fingers flipping through a thick folder. Hasn't seen a congregation in decades. No electricity, no plumbing. Town tried to sell it 5 times. You're the only one who's even looked at it. I bought it anyway. Cheap land, big stone structure, and an idea converted into a home, maybe a studio. I was a composer back then, not successful, but passionate. I thought the echo of that old vaulted ceiling might breathe life into the stagnant melodies in my head. It was remote, surrounded by dense trees and crumbling headstones. A tall, narrow building, its steeple leaning slightly to one side like it was tired of standing. Moss coated the stone like a second skin. The wooden sign out front had long since faded. Only the word Anselm remained, carved in deep, rigid letters. Inside, it smelled like dust and damp wood. The pews were still there, cracked and warped. The altar stood bare, save for a few broken candles. The stained glass windows were surprisingly intact, casting red and blue light across the floor. I noticed the choir loft immediately, high above the nave, accessible only by a narrow spiral staircase. Something about it pulled at me. The first few nights were uneventful. I slept on an air mattress near the front doors, listening to the creaks of the wind shifting through the cracks in the walls. I worked during the day, hauling out debris and sketching ideas for the layout. It started as humming. I'd be sitting at my keyboard and hear it, soft, wordless, coming from above, always from the loft. I thought it was wind at first, but it had rhythm, progression, harmony, and it was beautiful. I recorded it one night, just my phone left on a chair, while I climbed to the loft with a flashlight. Nothing. Dust, discarded hymnals, warped floorboards. But when I played the recording back, I nearly dropped my phone. The humming was there, louder, layered, and something else. A whisper, just one word. Sing. I slept with the lights on after that. The next night, the humming returned. This time, I didn't go up. I sat in the pews and listened. My chest felt tight, my mouth dry, but I couldn't move. It wasn't just humming anymore. It was voices, blended in eerie unison. Men and women, children, singing a song I'd never heard but somehow knew the melody of. And just before it ended, I heard the whisper again. Sing. That night, I dreamed I was in the loft, surrounded by pale faces, hollow eyes. Their mouths didn't move, but the singing poured out of them like smoke. I tried to scream, but my mouth was sewn shut. I woke up gasping. My lips felt sticky. When I went to the mirror, I found a thin line of dried blood across them, as if someone had pressed thread against my mouth during the night. I should have left, but the melody haunted me. I tried to transcribe it, but every attempt fell apart. The notes didn't behave. They slid off the staff, curved away from logic. I listened to the recording again, but it had changed. Now the voices sang in Latin, layered over strange harmonies. The whisper was louder. Sing. On the 7th night, I heard footsteps above me. Not creaking, footsteps. I grabbed my flashlight and crept up the spiral stairs, the beam flickering as I climbed. As I reached the top, the light went out. The loft was dark, but I could feel them. The air was thick, humming with breath just out of sync with mine. I turned, ready to run, but something cold closed around my wrist. I froze. Then a voice spoke.
We remember your voice.
I screamed, fought loose, ran down the stairs so fast I slipped and smashed my elbow against the railing. Didn't stop. Out the door, into the woods, didn't look back. I stayed in a motel 3 towns over, barely slept. I called a priest the next day, someone local, told him there were voices, maybe squatters. When he heard the name St. Anselm's, he went quiet. Then said, that church had a choir. Best in the county, they said. 40 voices. One night they rehearsed a hymn not found in any hymnal. Called it the Canticle of Echoes. That night, the floor collapsed. The loft gave way. Every member fell. 39 died instantly. The last one disappeared. I asked him if they ever rebuilt it. He said, no, they nailed the loft shut, boarded it, buried the sheet music. I drove back the next morning. Couldn't help myself. Had to see. The spiral stairs were gone. The loft, too, vanished. Nothing but a gaping void where it once hung. But I heard it again, distant, rising, a choir. And this time, they were singing one of my melodies. I was never a man of faith. Even as a child, church always felt more like punishment than salvation. Knees on hard pews, the priest's voice echoing like thunder through the chapel, the smell of mildew clinging to my clothes for hours afterward. But when I inherited my uncle's house in rural Vermont, I found myself inexplicably drawn to St. Bartholomew's, a decrepit stone church that stood across the field like a sentinel. My uncle, Father Gideon Thorne, had been the priest there for nearly 40 years. I hadn't seen him since I was 12. My mother had stopped taking me after what she called the incident. She never explained what it was, only that we were never to set foot inside St. Bartholomew's again. He died alone. They found him kneeling in the confessional, stone-faced, eyes open, staring at the wall. No signs of trauma, just stopped. The sheriff said it looked like he'd been listening to something right before the end. The house was a mess, dust an inch thick, crosses over every doorway, and dozens of journals locked in a safe. One key fit them all. The pages were full of mad scribblings, drawings of eyes, accounts of dreams, Latin phrases scrawled in the margins, and a repeated warning, never sit in the left confessional. I laughed when I first read that, old man superstition, but I read the whole journal in a single night. By morning, I wasn't laughing anymore. He described people vanishing after confession, not just missing, forgotten. Entire families erased from the memory of the community. He wrote of hearing voices from inside the booth when no one was there. Voices speaking secrets he never told anyone, secrets about him. I tried to shake it off, but that church, it called to me. Maybe guilt brought me there, or morbid curiosity. Maybe it was the way the bell rang, even though no one had pulled the rope in years. It was raining the first time I stepped inside. The air was heavy, thick with rot and wax. The altar was cracked. The stained glass windows were blackened with grime, saints peering out through murky halos. And at the far end, 2 confessionals, identical in shape, but something about the one on the left made my stomach turn. Its door hung slightly ajar. I stood there for minutes. Maybe I wanted to disprove his madness. Maybe I needed to hear it for myself. I don't know why I did it, but I stepped inside the left booth and sat down. Silence. Then, a creak. The partition slid open. No one was there, and yet, a voice whispered from the other side.
Bless me, Father, for I have sinned.
From a voice like shattered glass being stirred in warm water. I didn't respond. My throat was dry, heart hammering. My hand reached for the door handle, but it wouldn't move, locked from the outside. The voice continued.
I stole from my brother. I watched him drown and told no one. I whispered his name and buried his face in the riverbank. He called for me. I didn't answer.
I tried to scream, but nothing came out. The partition slammed shut. Silence. And then laughter. Faint at first, then growing, splitting, echoing inside the booth with me. I pounded on the door. Wood cracked under my fists, but it held firm. I don't know how long I was in there. Hours, maybe longer. At some point, the door creaked open on its own. I stumbled out, shaking, soaked in sweat. The church was pitch black. My phone was dead. I ran. Back at the house, I locked every door, burned the journal, or tried to. The pages didn't catch, not really. The fire blackened them, but the words remained. That night, I heard the whisper again, but not from the booth, from my bedroom closet.
Bless me, Father, for I have sinned.
I moved back to the city within the week, tried to forget, but I can't, because sometimes I pass a church and I see a shape in the booth, the left booth. And once, just once, I sat down in a crowded cathedral to catch my breath. People all around, normal service, but I looked up at the altar, and Father Gideon was standing there, mouth sewn shut with twine, eyes open and unblinking. No one else noticed him. And then I heard the voice again, from deep within the sanctuary.
Come back, I still have more to confess.
I was raised in a town so small it never even earned a spot on most maps. A patch of land with fewer than 200 souls, nestled deep in the Pennsylvania woods. The church sat at the center of it all. St. Eustace's, old stone Gothic spires, a rotting wooden steeple. Even as a boy, I felt something wrong with it. Not evil exactly, just off. Like a house with one too many rooms, or a painting with eyes that followed you a second too long. We weren't religious, but we went to St. Eustace's every Sunday because you had to. If you didn't, the town noticed. And when the town noticed, things started to go wrong. It began with my father. He stopped attending after his heart surgery, said he needed time to rest. 1 week later, he vanished. They said it was an accident, a nighttime walk gone wrong. The forest swallowed him, they whispered. The snow erased his tracks. I knew better. I left the town at 18 and never looked back. But a month ago, I got the call. My mother had died. Stroke, they said. Peaceful. The funeral would be held at St. Eustace's. I should have sent flowers and stayed away, but I went back. The church hadn't changed. Same stained glass windows with saints whose eyes were too wide, too real. Same heavy wooden doors, still carved with a Latin phrase I never understood. Ignis sub terra latet. Fire lies beneath. Inside, the air was thick, not dusty, just dense, as if the church were underwater. There were people in the pews, all familiar, all older. Some turned to glance at me, but most stared straight ahead. Their lips moved in silent rhythm. I couldn't hear what they whispered. The priest was not the man I remembered. Father Mallory had been old and soft-spoken, with a limp and kind eyes. This man was tall, towering really, bald, gaunt. His skin looked stretched, pale like candle wax. He smiled at me, and his teeth were too long.
I remember you,
he said as I approached the casket. His voice was smooth, too smooth, like oil in water.
You left us, Michael. Return to the fold. Your mother made peace. You should too.
The service was strange. It didn't follow the normal rites. The priest spoke in tongues I didn't recognize. The congregation repeated him word for word. I didn't join in. I just sat, heart pounding, sweat pooling at the base of my neck despite the cold. I tried to leave after the final hymn, but someone grabbed my arm. It was Mary Cross, my childhood friend. Her skin was gray. Her eyes were too dark, too deep. She leaned close and whispered,
"They won't let you go."
That night, I stayed in my mother's house. I tried to sleep, but the bells wouldn't stop. The church bell rang every 13 minutes. Exactly 13. I counted. At 3:26 a.m., I snapped. I pulled on my coat and walked to the church through the snow. I needed to know what was happening. The door was open. Inside, the pews were gone. Candles lined the walls, and symbols had been burned into the stone floor. The altar was gone, replaced with a hole perfectly round, about 6 feet across. Smoke seeped from it, and the smell burned meat and copper. I heard chanting. I should have run, but I was drawn forward. I stepped to the edge of the pit and looked down. There were stairs, narrow, spiraling, descending into the earth. I followed them. The descent seemed endless. I passed carvings in the stone, figures with twisted limbs, eyes gouged out, mouths sewn shut. One looked like my father. Finally, I reached a chamber. Vast. The ceiling lost in shadow. The air shimmered with heat, and at the center stood the congregation, dozens of them, wearing black robes, heads bowed. In front of them, the priest. He raised his hands and the room grew silent.
He returns,
The priest intoned.
the son of the offering, the heir of flame.
They turned to me, faces pale, eyes glassy, mouths chanting.
He returns.
Something shifted in the darkness beyond them. A groan, like the cracking of bones. A shape emerged, massive, many-limbed, blindfolded with stitched skin. Its flesh pulsed, as if breathing. It was waiting. The priest turned.
The bell has called you, Michael. Blood calls to blood.
I ran. I didn't think. I climbed the stairs 2 at a time, the chanting rising behind me. The church shook. The walls groaned as I burst out into the snow. Behind me, the bell tower caught fire. The flames didn't rise. They sank, spiraling downward like water down a drain. The church didn't burn. It simply folded inward, as if being devoured by something beneath. I drove until I couldn't see the town in my rearview mirror. That was 2 weeks ago. Now, every night I hear the church bells, every 13 minutes. No matter where I go, hotels, airports, cities, and I see them in crowds, in mirrors, in the dark, their mouths moving, silently, in rhythm.
He returns.